I have a little bit of a gripe to start the new year. Festivus was on December 23rd, but I'll go this right now. Let's stop with the fucking benchings and fucking scrubs playing in games. This weekend, we get amazing battles like Carson Wentz versus Sam Darnold. Ooh, boy. I know, Jay, you're excited to play Tyler Huntley instead of Lamar Jackson. So,
Yes, I
ooh,
actually am.
boy. Yes, let's just kill all of the MVPs. Matthew Stafford, it's just so ridiculous. And watching these bowls, I know Florida State was that, but 63-3, come on. And Missouri beating Ohio State, it's literally what team shows up until we get to the CFP. Okay, enough with the ranting. Happy New Year or happy second show of the happy second show of the week. I'm Steven.
And Happy New Year to you, good gentlemen. I always look forward to the first show of a new year because it means once more around the sun doing this show with y'all. And it's always fun. I'm Jay
Kaplan, but I was going to say that's Jay Kaplan, by the way, if he doesn't want to talk anymore in that introduction.
And I'm Anthony Strait. Happy New Year to you too, and everyone watching on Facebook and on YouTube as well. I have to ask a question because we saw a edible Pop-Tart mascot get eaten. Does that qualify as cannibalism? Because that was funny and kind of creepy at the same time. By the way, the Cheez-It was not edible.
No, but it can still kick the Pop-Tart's ass. Anyway.
Yeah, but nothing tops the mayonnaise bath, guys. Come on now, let's be
real. Everything tops. Everything
that's
tops
gross.
Bath. Welcome to On the Sports Lens, and let's get this show right on the track. Today's show will feature the finale for college football. It's in Houston, and we have one small step for the men of the NFL, the last step to the postseason as we preview Week 18. Also, Houston, we have a problem. We need to bring the final word about the initial CFP selections to the public before we never, ever talk about it again. But first, the New York Knicks played some defense this week and stole the opener for basketball. In what, so far, has been a quiet Knicks season, going between 2 to 6 games above 500 at certain points and occupying every place from the 5th through the 8th spots in the first 2 months of the season, the Knicks decided to shake things up a little bit. The New York Knicks grabbed the combo of OG Anunoby, Precious Achiuwa, and Malachi Flynn from the Toronto Raptors, and then sent out RJ Barrett, oh Canada, Emmanuel Quigley, and a second-round pick. This is a move that is sure to send some sadness to the Knicks fans, as Barrett and Quigley were hot and cold scoring-wise for the garden parties at MSG, but changes have to be made. So the Knicks have done it. So, Anthony, what do the Knicks get with the OJ package, freshly squeezed?
Well, before I start, I just want to say thank you, RJ Barrett. Thank you so much for 5 years as a Knick. Wish him all the very best in Toronto, going home, and he played well for Team Canada, so maybe he's a fresh start will do him some good. And thank you again, Emmanuel, Quigley. For the Knicks, OG Anunoby, he's actually been someone that the Knicks had on their radar for quite some time, the last couple of years, actually. And what the Knicks are getting at him is a guy who brings defense. He was all NBA defensive player last year, with the Toronto Raptors. He peaked at 17 points again. That's actually his career high. This season, he's averaging 51.1 points a game, just on 4 rebounds and just under 3 assists. And he is 34% 3-point percentage this season actually is a step in improvement as far as outside shooting that RJ Barrett was giving the Knicks. And obviously you mentioned RJ Barrett has been kind of up and down and a bit of a streaky shooter throughout his whole career.
You think?
And even at his highest shoot percentage, he was actually below the NBA regular average for 3-point shooting. So that's definitely a step in the right direction. Anunoby is 37.4% this season behind New York, and we saw in his 2 games with the Knicks that when he settles into that corner spot that he can pretty much knock him down. And it's something that floor space has been a problem with the Knicks. But this trade really was facilitated with the Mitchell Robinson injury, and we saw the Knicks' defensive woes starting to show up. When Robinson went down and obviously done for the season. but then they had a lack of depth at center. And obviously, Prince Achua, never laughed at a grown man named Precious, by the way. Precious
Yeah.
Achua. Never laughed at a grown man with that name. He gives the Knicks some depth in the front court. And obviously, with Hartenstein moving to the start lineup, they only had Taj Gibson behind him as far as a big, because Diego Sims also missed some action with an injury. So that gives the Knicks a little depth there. But one of the key things about this trade is that the Knicks have flexibility. They can offer Anunoby an extension. And it was June 30th. I think it's the deadline for that extension. They only gave up the Detroit Pistons, the pick that they own for the Detroit Pistons, meaning that they still have their own plethora of draft picks, still to choose from. I don't think this is it for the Knicks. I do think they're still probably going to make one more deal before the trade deadline. But for right now, this Knicks team needed help defensively in the worst way. RJ Barrett, he's very athletic, but I always felt like as a small forward, as a wing, that he was out of position. I always saw him more as a two guard than as a small forward. Even in today's NBA small ball lineup era that we see, and Anunoby, he brings a little more size, a little more length to the small forward position, and also he does chip in quite a bit on the boards. And we saw that a couple of nights ago, actually 24 hours ago, against the Chicago Bulls, that are very rare nationally televised primetime game. We don't see these anymore, obviously. But the Knicks, I think this is a trade that benefits them in the short term. It doesn't hurt them in the long term, that's for sure. But overall, I mean, obviously, putting them after the emotions settled, after the shock of the trade. I mean, this literally happened early Saturday afternoon, but we were all kind of getting into bowl season or getting our New Year's preparations going, or in my case, getting over a strep throat. But I think for the Knicks, it's a low risk, high reward trade that so far the two games has actually benefited them, because the Knicks defensively has been able to get at it. They knocked off the number one team in the Western Conference in Minnesota, and it was able to pull away from Chicago. Shooting is still an issue. I still think, obviously, that they have the backup point guard position is definitely a question mark that's going to be holding around the Knicks moving forward. And obviously, Jay, I'll set you up with this with the Raptors side of things. Losing Emmanuel quickly is surely going to hurt the Knicks bench. So how does his addition, along with RJ Barrett, help a Toronto Raptors team that right now are at a crossroads right now as far as where they want to go with the organization?
Yeah, all interesting questions. Obviously, quickly is the bigger, more critical piece of this trade for Toronto. I mean, I think he'll fit in nicely with Scotty Barnes. Their skill sets appear to be very complementary in the Raptors starting backcourt. Quickly fills a definitive need as a combo guard. He's not a pure point guard, who can score at all three levels as well as handle the ball and defend at the point of attack. With the Knicks, he was shooting 45.4 from the floor, 39.5 from three on 5.4 threes per game, 87.2 from the line. He was scoring 15 points per game, 2.6 boards, 2.5 assists, averaging 24 minutes a game. With the Raptors, he's finally going to get to play starter minutes, and his history has shown that when he's put in that role, he tends to come up big, which should lead to the payday that he's looking for that the Knicks weren't going to give him in the six-man role that he was stuck in New York. And last season, quickly started 21 games either in place of point guard Jalen Brunson or next to him as the two guard in place of RJ Barrett. In those 21 games, quickly averaged 22.6 points per game, 5.4 boards, 5.1 assists on a little under 47% shooting from the floor, a tick over 40% from beyond the arc, and 84.6% from the line in 38 minutes per game. All of those numbers exceeded his overall per minute production numbers from last year. This season with the Knicks, he increased those, per minute production numbers to what you look for and want from a starting guard with his skill set. His per 36 minutes numbers this year with the Knicks, 22.5 points per game, 3.8 boards, 3.7 assists. Now let's talk about that three-level scoring ability. Check out these next-gen stats. Last year, Quickly was one of only 10 guards in the association that converted a 65% clip at the rim, 45% from mid-range, 36% from beyond the arc per cleaning the glass. 6 of the other 9 guards were all-stars. This season, even with a drop in rim attempts and efficiency, Quickly is still one of only 14 guards who are converting at 57% at the rim, 45% from mid-range, 37% from 3. Add it all up, but over the last 2 seasons, just his age 23 and 24 seasons, Quickly has converted at a slightly above average efficiency on significant volume in each of those 3 areas. He's got good shot-making skills. He has a good floater game. He's a threat to pull up and shoot, which makes him very effective in the pick-and-roll game. And as I talked about in our Knicks preseason preview, is excellent in transition. He loves to grab those long rebounds and then get out and go. He could stand to improve his playmaking, though, which is something I think he'll get more of a chance to do with the Raptors. He's not a bad playmaker. He doesn't compound, any attempts that become where he overdrives with bad decisions, and he's about as unturnover prone as it gets. 1.5 per game, 2.1 per 100 possessions, with a 7.6 rate. And while he's solid at finding rollers or cutters, he's not as good on kickouts to shooters to set up 30-point attempts. In 30 games with the Knicks before the trade, he only had 26 assists led to 3-pointers, and most of those happened after he either picked up the ball and or exhausted other options. As a starting guard, he needs to improve on that. If he can, it would benefit his new teammates as well as make him even harder to defend than he already is. If Quickly can grow into the role the Raptors have planned for him, they'll have their starting backcourt locked in for the next decade, as long as they have no qualms about paying him what he's worth. As for Barrett, who will now suit up for the team he grew up rooting for, no doubt a dream come true for one of Canada's best basketball players. In 26 games with the Knicks prior to the trade, the 24-year-old fifth-year swingman out of Duke was averaging 18.2 points per game, 4.3 boards, 2.4 assists in a career-low 29.5 minutes per game. There were those in the Knicks organization who believed that Barrett's skill set as a scorer and a playmaker would be better served in more of a free-flowing offensive scheme, such as the one that Raptors head coach Darko Rajakovic would love to install. Now, the Knicks finally realized that Barrett's preferred style, downhill attacks on the rim as often as possible, didn't really pair well with their 2 primary offensive options. Point guard Jalen Brunson also loves getting into the painted area, and power forward Julius Randle's been working from down low a lot more this season. Add to that a conventional center, Mitchell Robinson, until he got hurt, and there just wasn't a lot of room for Barrett to work. Add to that, as Anthony referenced, a suspect jump shot and a propensity for tunnel vision, and you have a player who no longer really fit with the Knicks offense, at least not with the rest of the starters, which is why head coach Tom Thibodeau had Barrett run with the reserves as much as possible, as it allowed him to be the primary or secondary offensive option alongside Quickly. Even just separating his minutes from Randle's improved Barrett's playmaking. His assist percentage jumped from 10.1% last year to 18.3% this season in minutes he played without Randle. And while his three-point shot continues to be inconsistent, his free throw percentage is up to 83.1% from 74% last season, which is a key for a player who likes to attack the rim. Barrett has averaged 10 to 13 attempts per game over the last 3 seasons at the Cup, and his 6.5 field goals per game off drives over the last 2 seasons rank in the top 20 league-wide. His 2.5 free throw attempts per game on drives ranks in the top 12. The issue with Barrett has always been actually finishing those drives. He hit on just 59% of his shots at the rim last year, 24th percentile, and is at just 57% this year, 37th percentile per cleaning the glass. And Barrett has never had a season where his true shooting percentage was within 5 points of the NBA average. If Toronto uses him the same way New York did, he really has to improve his mid-range game to the point that defenders have to respect it, which would potentially open up the rest of his driving game as well as make him a better playmaker by forcing more help rotations than he currently does. He might be better served as the actual 6th man in Toronto, but considering the fact that in his 5th season, his production hasn't really improved that much overall, and his inconsistent shooting causes spacing issues, you have to wonder what the best role for him is on this team. The upside is that he's under contract for 3 more years after this one, so the Raptors do have some time to figure that out. The interesting thing with Barrett is that, unlike Quickly, he's shown he can come up big in the playoffs. Quickly's played 13 playoff games in his career. His effective field goal percentage has been under 40%, while Barrett went on an 8-game heater across 2 rounds of the playoffs last season, putting up 22.5 points, 5 boards, and 3 assists, shooting a little under 50% from the field and 38% from beyond the arc, again, across the series with the Cavs and the Heat. Bottom line, I believe and I think that this is a good trade for the Raptors. They get a piece they really need in quickly, who will finally get a chance to show what kind of a player he can be with consistent starter level minutes. And they get a player who may have just needed to come home to a change of scenery and role, the combination of which may put him in a position to take his game to the level folks expected out of RJ Barrett when he was the number 3 overall pick in 2019.
But does it improve Toronto is the most important question. They're still 14
Remains to be seen.
That's the problem, though, and that's a question. These are moves that have been asked for a long time because the Raptors, the only real success that they had as a top-level team was the year after Kawhi, where they were the number 2 seed. And I think a lot of the blueprint of the NBA is build it up, break it down, and then build it back up again. And I don't think Masai Ujiri has ever really gotten to that point, and that's why this trade is interesting as it's sort of a why now situation for the Raptors. And I don't know why now, because OG Anunoby...
I think I have a thought on that.
I have a thought on that, but because OG has been pretty much on the trade block, I would say, for about a year now.
He has, and I think the Raptors saw a chance to fill a need, which they did. They needed somebody with slightly better point guard skills than Scotty Barnes. I mean, what they have right now with the two of them is going to be two Swiss Army knife type of players who have certain skill sets that are distinctly theirs, but they do complement each other, as I said. In terms of what they gave up for with Anunoby as a wing defender, Barrett has shown this year some improved defense. He's shown he can guard at least 3 players on the perimeter. So I don't think there's going to be too much of a drop off. I think this is not. I think this is just the start of what they're going to do in Toronto. Siakam's contract is up at the end of the year, and I don't know if he's back next year. So I think what you're seeing now is the first step to sort of, if not a complete tear down and rebuild, a definite reconstruction of the roster in Toronto, starting with Barnes and starting because they're looking to build around Barnes going forward. And I think these are a couple of good pieces to fit around him for starters. I don't think
I vehemently disagree on it being not too much of a downgrade. Going from Anunoby to Barrett defensively, because there's about 10 people in today's NBA that can guard all positions, and
that's fair. A big help. But the difference is that Barnes can pick up some of that slack defensively as well. So that's why I'm saying it's not a complete loss. The thing is that Barrett gives them the potential for a wider array of offensive skills at the wing position. Like I said, I think this is just the start. I don't think he's done. So I'm not looking at this trade inside of its own window. I'm looking at it as the first piece of a bigger plan.
Which is what Anthony kind of sort of did with the Knicks. And I think that's why you don't know if they needed to make this trade or not. I think the pieces fell right on both sides. So the answer really to this, did they need to make this trade, is yes and no. Yes, because I think Tom Thibodeau's identity is defense. And I think you were starting to see a little bit of that falling apart in losses earlier this week to Oklahoma City and Orlando. And I think Immanuel Quickley is still not a consistent shooter. He is a guy who will shoot under 40% more often than not. He is a 45% shooter average-wise, but there are some nice 70%, 80% games that kind of boost up that average. But I do think that, again, there's still moves to be made with this team based on the draft capital. It's nice to say that they have draft capital that they have, and based on what they have in their in-house. I don't think that they needed to make this trade because I'm not 100% sure if it gets them in the top 3. Because you're thinking of Boston, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia. That's where the East goes through those 3 teams. They do not have a good record against those 3 teams. In fact, they've only won 1 game against those 3 teams at all this year. They'll play Philadelphia tomorrow
night.
Yes, so that's what I'm thinking of. And so if the Knicks want to continue on the road of being a 4 or 5 seed, they're in that discussion. Isaiah Hartenstein had a 15-rebound game last night. So we know he can pick up the slack in certain situations with Mitchell's injury. They still need a little bit of a problem. There's still a little bit of a problem in the backup center position, but that I think could also get addressed over time in a small move here or there. But again, this is not the Knicks don't have any stars. This is more just of you need a lot more firepower to deal with those three teams. And I don't know outside of those three teams who is anywhere near that yet. And that's why this is a yes and no trade for me. I initially hated it because I don't think you're getting enough offense back. And yes, I said OG is a very good defensive player, but guess what? The NBA just had 4 games last night where a team scored over 140 points. This is not as much of a defensive league anymore. But the one thing that I have
said, they're legislating defense out of the NBA.
But the one thing that does help, and that Anthony sort of mentioned it, Barrett leaving opens up a little bit of this offense too, and I think that'll help Julius Randle a little bit more. He's been probably just as consistent of a scorer as Brunson has been since the first month of the season, and so the Julius Randle roller coaster is on the uptick right now. We never know when it'll hit the downtick because, again, that's what the Julius Randle experience is. But one injury screws this team over majorly.
Yeah. And I'll say this, too. You can only have so many left-handed shooters on one side on the paint. Yep. So, obviously, having 3 lefties being your primary scorers was a bit of an issue when all 3 guys like to operate from left to right. Or in the case of Bronson, he likes to get to the paint. Can't do that. We got 2-3 other guys clogging the paint on a regular basis. So RJ, Anunoby would be more of a spot shooter who doesn't need the basketball.
He definitely improves the spacing.
Kind of help the Knicks out a little. That helps the Knicks out a little bit.
Yeah,
it does.
He's gonna live in the corner, and he has shown he can knock down corner threes with better than NBA average efficiency, which should be good. It should improve the flow of the Knicks offense.
And look, one thing, if Anunoby turns out to be the Bruce Bowen that the Knicks desperately need, they'll take it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, without a doubt.
They need a Bruce Bowen, but again, you're going to need to replace that 30 points that you just traded away. You're not getting that back yet. Nope. So the question is, can someone like Miles McBride also step up? So we'll see what happens.
Dante DiVincenzo, or anyone else.
Dante's going to get more time too. Yeah. But again, this also shortens the rotation for the Knicks, and I think that's something that they have really needed for a while because Tibbs not a big fan of short rotations. He'll play 15 guys if he wants to. That's what he is. All right, let's move on. All right, what are you gents doing this Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time? If you say anything but watching the college football playoff national title game between the Michigan Wolverines and the Washington Huskies, you're lying. This will mark the first time we're seeing a national title game between 2 13-0 teams, and will also be the second time we will see no SEC teams, it just means more, go for the CFP prize. First time this happened was the first CFP championship. Some call it a Big Ten Pac-12 showdown in the playoff for the last time. I call it a preview to their Week 6 matchup next year when they're both in the Big Ten. Ha! Let's start with Michigan, who needed a 27-20 grinded out overtime win against Alabama in the Rose Bowl, and they are ready to grab their first title in 27 years. Jay, take a look at J.J. McCarthy for the Michigan Wolverines on the offensive side of the ball, and then Anthony, we'll let you talk about the defensive side.
Yeah, as much as head coach Jim Harbaugh has preached offensive balance for the Wolverines this season, we all know that both he and offensive coordinator Sharon Moore would prefer to very much lean into their identity of a run-heavy team led by running back Blake Corum and based around physical offensive line play. It's been their strength all season, and it's worked as evidenced by them running the ball for the final 32 plays in their win over Penn State back in November. Now that'll be plan A, especially against the Huskies run defense that was 86th in the nation in yards per carry allowed. But with that being said, at some point, Michigan will have to put the ball in the hands of their junior quarterback and let him create some plays with either his arm or his legs or both, which he has very much shown he can do. And the win over Alabama was just the latest example. He has good foot speed in the open field, and he throws well on the run, whether the play is on schedule or off schedule. He's very accurate and can make all the throws and do it from different arm angles. though he has had some issues with ball placement, especially on crossing routes. He's better going to his right, but can still make throws going to his left. Overall, McCarthy has improved his decision-making this season, learning what he can and cannot do, especially as it relates to the type of coverage windows he's willing to throw into based on what he sees both on film and during games. He showed that full skill set on the drive against Bama that sent the game into overtime. Now, the Bama game couldn't have started much worse for McCartney with an absolutely awful sideline throw that was initially ruled an interception, only to be overturned on review. There were stretches throughout the game where McCarthy and the offense struggled to move the ball, picking up only 2 first downs and gaining just 41 yards in the second half prior to that final drive. Yet when the game was on the line, McCarthy stepped up, led the Wolverines on a 75-yard game-tying drive, completing 3 of the biggest passes of the season along the way, hitting a wide-open Corum on a great play design on 4th and 2 to keep the drive alive, then finding his favorite target, wide receiver Roman Wilson, first for 29 yards, then again for the 4-yard touchdown to tie the game. McCarthy finished 17 of 27, 63%, which is below average for him. 221 yards, 8.2 per attempt, 3 scores, 0 picks, and a 168.4 passer rating. He also added 25 yards rushing on 3 carries, including a key 16-yard scamper on that final drive. The key for McCarthy in the CFP title game will be recognizing the rush and coverage schemes that Washington will throw at him. The book on the Huskies is they do everything possible pre-snap to disguise their intentions. Per an offensive coordinator who played Washington this season, quote, they put everybody up at the line and make the quarterback think a little bit, then drop everybody into coverage, and you don't know if they're playing zone or man. They can get creative with disguising, making it look like a zero pressure where you have to have a lot of conversations as a staff on how you're going to handle it. They may bluff and drop out. They made it look like cover 0, but it was cover 3, and they just shoot guys out. They had our quarterbacks in a tough look at times. If you can keep McCarthy guessing, I thought that's what they did against Ewers, even when it's on the 13-yard line in the last 2 plays of the game. He was mugged up, and it made him throw hot. Ewers was throwing fade balls the entire time because he didn't know if it was a hot pressure or not, end quote. If when the ball is put in his hands, Jamie McCarthy is able to recognize where the Husky pressure is coming from and where his throwing windows are, and if the offensive line gives him time to work through his progressions, he was only sacked once in the win over Alabama, then he'll have a chance to be the dynamic difference maker he's been for the Wolverines all season.
All right, Anthony, go to the other side of the ball. What does Michigan have to do to stop what Washington brings? And they brought a lot on Monday, too.
Well, Mike Sanders is a guy I'm focusing on the defensive backfield. Yeah, I think back to the game against Rutgers, saying he made that miraculous interception that he took back to the house. Now, keep in mind, and Jay knows this, he was a wide receiver when he was a 4-star recruit coming to Michigan. And just before the 2022 season, Jim Harbaugh called him up after he wanted to switch positions, saying, you know what, it worked out for the best for him and for the Wolverines for that matter. As a defensive back, he's been like a perfect glove. 2022, he played 13 games, over 600 stats, 43 tackles, 7 assists. This season, he leads the team to interceptions with 5. On top of having 19 tackles and 10 assists. In the Rose Bowl game, 6 tackles, 4 solo, 1 tackle for a loss, and of course, the goal line stand that's going to stand in Michigan law and then on for a very, very long time. But now you have a Washington Husky offense that's number 1 ranked in the country that comes in with a slew of offensive weapons. Obviously, you got the quarterback in Pennis Jr. You have the wide receivers with Paul McMillan, Bernard, Oduzzi, I think I pronounced his last name correctly, who, by the way, 80%. And by the way, Roman Duzzi, 80% of his catches are either for first downs or touchdowns this season. So pretty much, if Pettis is going to go one-on-one, I mean, it's going to him all the time. It's really bad news for the opposing team. This is the most explosive offense by far that Michigan is going to play this season. With Alabama and Milroe, the one day the Wolverines didn't have to worry about, at least as the game progressed, was Milroe beating them through the air. Milroe hurt them the most with his leg.
I don't even think they respected Milroe through the air towards the end of the game, which is something that not a lot of teams have been able to really do effectively.
Yeah, and in this case now with Pennis, he's not going to beat you with his legs. He is going to pick you up with his arm. And obviously Michigan's defensive front four, their front line, is going to be a key matchup against Washington's offensive line, and getting pressure in the backfield. They sat Miller what 5 times in the first half, 6 total. So that pressure is going to be key because you don't want to, good as Seneschal's been all season, and this Wolverines defensive backfield, you don't want to leave these guys one-on-one on an island with this many weapons for an extended period of time. So it's going to be a team effort for the defense. Obviously, Senechal, when he's matched up one-on-one, whether it's a doozy or any of these other receivers, he's got to win his one-on-one matchups. And Michigan did a great job of mixing up the zone coverage and throughout the game, the Rose Bowl game. I thought that really did throw off Milroe and Alabama's offense, particularly on third and long situations where they did want to drop back. And Milroe thought when he scrambled out of the pocket, he would pick up an easy first down, or you'd see 2 or 3 Wolverines waiting for him at the sticks. So it's going to be a strength against strength matchup Monday night. That's going to be very interesting. Seneschal, he's got to be the guy. He's been there He's been the number one cornerback all season, all season long. He's going to more likely be the guy on Doozy. But even so, whenever whether it's man to man or even man zone, he's got to win his one-on-one. He's got to be able to take away at least a portion of the field for Michigan secondary to really be able to hold up for a long period of time. And that's if the front four is able to hit home, and they've been able to do that all season. But this is going to be a real test come Monday night.
Yeah, I mean, the
Michigan
interesting
is
thing about Sanders still, Anthony, is that he's listed in the media guide as the nickel back, and that's a little deceiving because he is the Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, he's
Jesse
not there like a
Minter,
nickelback.
yeah,
by
defensive
no means.
coordinator Jesse Minter will put him anywhere and everywhere, depending on the matchup or what the situation dictates. He is the leader of that secondary. He's responsible for getting them into the right coverages. He has been the heart and soul of that secondary. And yeah, I can't think of anybody who's going to be more important to that defense on Monday.
When you watch Seneschal on film, he reminds me a little bit of Patrick Peterson and what Bruce Arians like to do with Arizona and back in those days and move him around the defensive backfield. You would see him be one-on-one press an awful lot, but he was never just on one side of the field. And I think that always mixed things up with the Cardinals coverage. And Michigan did that very well against Alabama. They're going to have to do the same thing against the Huskies.
Yep.
And I don't think Alabama's going to be. Alabama did a lot of dinking and dunking in the second half, especially after Michigan got a lot of pressure on Jalen Milroe. I do think that they're going to need the same exact performance against Penix, because if Penix has any time to throw, I think we've seen he gets the ball there. He is by far someone who is very efficient behind the line, and I'm very interested to see if Michigan is as aggressive as they were that first half against Milroe, because, be fair, Milroe was at his best when he scrambled, and pretty much didn't really get a chance to do that at all on Monday. So, Michigan, with those 5 sacks and everything else that happened, didn't take their first lead until midway through the second quarter, which is, they could have finished this game, by the way, with those stats that they had in the first half. There is a reason why that happened, and it is special teams. God help me. This was a bad game.
But special.
They were almost the cost of this loss. Alabama's first 7 points basically came on Samaj Morgan basically just trying to start running with the ball too early. Freshman mistake. And that's basically how they got their first 7. You saw a very rare kick missed by James Turner, a 49-yard kick. Now, at what point can you ever say during an Alabama game that the special teams was a huge advantage for Alabama? Their kicker just made 2 over 50 pretty much right out of the gate. Then there was the play that probably made Jay's throat go into his chest and probably still hasn't done it yet. and that is when senior wide receiver Jake Thaw tried to secure a return, even though Michigan had a ton of time on the clock and could have easily gotten a chance to get to a possible game-winning field goal, but nope. He tried to run with the ball, and if Michigan thought that the Michigan State game, where the fumble, where the punt was muffed, and they got the touchdown to win the game, that would have fallen to a huge number 2 on the list if that ball was either a safety or recovered by Alabama. It wasn't, and this game went into overtime. But any of those mistakes happened on Monday against a better offensive team, and I think you can say pretty clearly Washington is a better offensive team at this point than Alabama. They lose.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. And so you can't live on the edge like that, especially in a national championship game. I don't think the floodgates would open for Michigan because Washington plays games under 10 points like it's their job. They haven't won a game by more than 10 points since the third week of September 2023, of course. So I'm very, very interested to see what Michigan does to rectify the mistakes that they had on special teams on Monday night, because they got outworked on that a lot. Anthony, respond.
I would say this because you gave me a little bit of a flack, but for being a special teamer who hate kickers on Monday night. I would say 2 days that went wrong with a special teams. Number one, you had a return specialist. Inside your 5, you never ever call for a fair catch.
Especially in that situation.
Under that circumstances. Number 2, if you call for a fair catch, you better lift the ball into your hands and make sure you catch it. You're not moving. You're not going to get touched. That's the only thing you have to do if you call for a fair catch. You catch the ball. You see the ball into your hands. You have one job. And I don't know if it was the moment that maybe
it was the moment.
Or what
it just seemed like the moment.
But he better be thanking his lucky stars that his momentum was marked outside the goal line. That gave Michigan at least a chance to escape into overtime and not get called for a safety because of a couple of very minor but very fundamental mistakes. If you're gonna call, if the kids out there, if you do play special teams, these are things your coaches are gonna be on you time and time again. If you're fielding kicks, you have to see the ball into your hands, and if you're inside your 5, let the ball go over your head. If they're down on the 1, so be it. But you get away from it, and you make sure your teammates get away from it at the same time.
And ironically enough, Shaw was back there, because he's considered a sure-handed punt returner, and he's the guy they put in those situations, and also because of the muff that Morgan had earlier in the game. So, I mean, to see both of them do it, just
free 7 points, by the way, there, and especially in a game where you knew that this was not going to go past 30. Giving away any points in that game was a killer. Luckily for Michigan, they were the better team, at least through all of the first half and probably the latter stages of the fourth quarter. That third quarter and that beginning of the fourth quarter, yikes, offensively and defensively. And that's something that JJ McCarthy is going to rectify. Although, as Anthony and I talked about on Monday, Blake Corum had a man's run for that go-ahead touchdown. That guy is going to be missed in Ann Arbor, and rightfully so. Okay, Washington won the Sugar Bowl on Monday, 37-31 against Texas. I wrote it as Sugar Bowl too. They won the Sugar Bowl 37-31 against Texas, and the fact that it went down to the last play should not surprise anyone. They've played 10 games in a row decided by 10 points or less. So hopefully this doesn't mean we have another TCU situation going on this year. Hopefully. Jay and Anthony, you have the floor. And Jay, let's talk about Michael Penix Jr., who had I would want to say a spotless game on Monday, and definitely proved why he should be here.
Yeah, I mean, is there anyone playing at a more elite level right now than the Heisman Trophy runner-up? I mean, the Huskies quarterback has been.
Well, there's always two quarterbacks playing, so I can only imagine how there's nobody else playing at an elite level.
Yeah. Well, coming into the playoffs, I mean, the Huskies quarterback has been carving up opposing second all season to the tune of an FBS leading 4,648 yards passing and 35 touchdowns. And his latest performance in the national semifinals against Texas was a masterpiece. 461 total yards, 430 through the air, 31 on the ground. 29 of 38 passing, that's 76.3% completion, 11.3 yards per attempt, 2 scores, 0 picks, 0 sacks, and a 188.7 passer rating. Led the Pac-12 champs on 5 scoring drives of 8 plays or more en route to that thrilling 37-31 win over Texas. Penix put up 255 yards in the air in the first half alone and began the second half by completing his first 11 passes. Now, unlike J.J. McCarthy, Penix has the ball in his hands all game long, and his entire repertoire of passes was on display against the Longhorns. Short, intermediate, long, didn't matter what type of pass play it was, Penix was on point with all of his throws. None came remotely close to being picked off. When Texas blanketed his receivers, Penix connected with tight end Jack Westover in the middle of the field. When the Longhorns brought pressure, Penix utilized his checkdowns. And as I said, when he saw his favorite targets beating the Longhorns coverage down the field, he went deep with frightening success, like with the 77-yarder to wide receiver Jalen Polk on the 4th play of the game for the Huskies, and a 52.
By the way, the slowest run I have ever seen in my entire life, Jalen Polk looked like he was gassed 30 yards into it. And I'm like, that is 7. Come on.
And he had a 52-yard bomb to Rome Odunze later in the game. Now, Penix and his trio of receivers are a nightmare for anyone. Odunze, the Biletnikoff Award finalist, Polk, along with Jalen McMillan, who I referenced in our year-end show as the guy most people have forgotten about because he's coming back from injury, but could be the most talented of all of them. The 3 of them were targeted 20 times in the win against Texas and combined for 19 catches, 353 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Washington's Joe Moore award-winning offensive line gave Penix all night to light Texas up. They never let the Longhorns get to their quarterback, and on the season, they only allowed 11 sacks in 14 games. Only 4 teams allowed less sacks on the season. Having those 3 receivers allows Washington to be able to use max protect schemes with 6 or 7 blockers. So even if teams blitz, the offensive line is able to keep the pocket clean. That said, when pressured, Penix's completion percentage dropped from 73.7 to 44.6, and his yards per attempt dropped from 9.6 to 8 flat per True Media. Something to think about. And Anthony alluded to this previously, as Penix goes against the Michigan defense that ranks in the top 10 in Division I in pressure rate, also according to True Media, despite not having a superstar pass rusher. The Wolverines defense, as Anthony noted, will be the biggest test for Penix and the Huskies offense. Michigan's scoring defense is number 1 in the nation, allowing just 10.2 points per game. And its pass defense is in the top 10 in yards per game, yards per attempt, completion percentage, quarterback rating, interceptions, and team pass efficiency. That being said, and nothing against Biletnikoff Award winner Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, and the Ohio State passing attack, the Wolverines secondary hasn't faced anything quite like what the Washington passing attack can do. It's why the Huskies are second in the nation with 39 pass plays longer than 30 yards this season. As one coach put it, Michigan's defense is basically the same as Texas's, but with better defensive backs. The Wolverines are number 3 in the nation in opposing quarterbacks passer rating. Longhorns were 49th. Here's the quote by that same coach. If I'm Michigan, I'm utilizing a lot of disguises in my coverage. Pre-snap, I want Michael to see cover 2, but really I'm cover 3. I want him to see man, but at snap, we're getting into cover 3, cover 4. You press those corners, you disguise, and you send pressure. That's what Arizona State did. They were in his head a little bit. He didn't have time to go through his reads, and it wasn't as clean as he wanted it to be. That 15-7 win over the Sun Devils was the only game this season where Penix threw more than 1 pick, and one of only 2 games where he did not throw a touchdown pass, and the Huskies did not have a pass play longer than 21 yards. If Michigan follows that blueprint, they have a chance. If they can't, it's going to be a long day for Jesse Minter's defense, and Penix has spent the season creating long days for the opponent's defense.
One thing that's kind of funny, and obviously these both will be Big Ten teams this year, is Michigan hasn't faced an offense as explosive as Washington this year, and Washington hasn't faced a defense as explosive as Michigan's this year. Come on. Michigan and Texas are in two different waves of the spectrum. I know it's like 49 to 6, but they always say it's like, oh, we were up the whole time. Everybody's throwing against us. No, your defense is suspect. Speaking of the Michigan defense, they are one of the tops in the nation and can bore you to death if you watch them against Penn State. Watch tape back or don't, please don't. Who are you looking for on the Washington side of the defense? They definitely don't add up to Michigan, but they had a pretty good game against Texas.
Yeah, I'm looking at defensive end Braylon Trice, the 3-star recruit out of Sandra Day O'Connor High School. That's an interesting name. But the last 2 seasons, obviously sophomore and this season, he's been one of the best defensive ends in the nation. Last season he finished with 8 sacks on 15 quarterback hits. This season, 6 sacks on the same amount of hits, and anchoring a Washington Husky defense that's been more bend but don't break for most of the season. Again, in the Sugar Bowl against Texas, he had 2 sacks and 3 tackles for a loss, which is very impressive. The Huskies as a team, even though they struggled, and boy did they hang on by a thread in the end against Texas. By the way, that opportunity happened because of an injury on the Washington when Washington had the football. I see Rabbi's reaction. I think he wanted to talk about that.
That is exactly what I wanted to talk about on that. I'm just the host here, listening to 2 panelists talk about all my points.
I am so sorry for the spoiler. Okay, I apologize. But yes, the Huskies did come away with 2 takeaways. They were able to force 5 punts, and this against a very potent Texas offense. But now they're playing a Michigan Wolverines offense that pounds the football better than anyone. Blake Corum, we just mentioned, he had that a grown man run in the overtime against Alabama. Michigan, if they can control the clock, they can run the football. That's one way to neutralize Washington's explosive offense, keep them off the field. And a potent run attack would do that. Well, Trice comes in. It's not necessarily questioning the quarterback. He's going to have to provide some support and stopping the run. And the Huskies have shown that they are very susceptible to giving up big passing plays. I think they gave them over 20 plays this season of 50 or more yards. They have really struggled. They're 110th against the pass. Some of it being that there were so many one-sided games that teams kind of had to throw the ball to get back into it. And obviously, when you're down by 2-3 touchdowns, you're going to be putting up a lot of passing yards in that regard. But at the same time, we saw against Oregon, in their 2 matchups and against Texas, that Washington's defense they do just enough. They give up a lot of yards within the 20s, but they do a good job of stiffening up inside the red zone. And what Trice is going to have to do is, and this is a pick your poison scenario. You got to take away Michigan's running game and force J.J. McCarthy to beat you through the air, which is kind of rolling the dice a little bit because Washington's secondary is not that great. And McCarthy has shown in big games, particularly against Ohio State in the past, he can't beat you if he gets enough time throwing the football. So this is going to be an interesting situation for the Huskies defense. If they can, keep Michigan from getting a 3rd and short. I think that's one of the main things. They got to win the first and second down, and force McCarthy into one of the 3rd long situations. That kind of takes away from Michigan's running game a little bit. But also, if Washington gets a lead and forces Michigan out of what they want to do and want to feel more comfortable. And for Trice, it's going to be more of not just going after the quarterback, it's more supporting the run and stopping the run, but also if he can't get to the quarterback, helping to collapse that pocket and speed up McCarthy's time in the pocket and make him throw the pass a little quicker, but then he's willing to do so. So this is a double-edged sword scenario that the Huskies are going to be dealing with on the national championship game.
I am very interested to see what Michigan, because there were times in that game, you say pick your poison, but there were times in that game, again, especially in those first 20 minutes of the second half where McCarthy looked worse than average. I just think he had no real
Rhythm.
rhythm with his receivers. And I think that really just stopped all the momentum of that game. It's why Michigan was down or tied for more than that game and they were up. And I think, again, in a game where Washington probably wants to get this in the 30s or 40s, Michigan probably wants to keep this in the 20s. Seeing what McCarthy is going to do will at least allow Michigan to adjust. Now, Anthony was mentioning a certain person that was down in the final seconds of the game. The reason I yelled at him was it was Dylan Johnson, the Washington running back, who is expected to play after that injury. It hurt because they literally could have ran the clock down to about 10 seconds if the injury never happened. And Texas got a shot inside the 20 to get a final touchdown. It did not, so that's why Washington is here. Dylan Johnson is a bowling ball this year. Doesn't really do a lot of exciting things out there, but he has 1,162 yards and 16 touchdowns. Huge also in the pass protecting game that Jay had mentioned beforehand. So you need a big guy to do that. And also on Monday night, Johnson had the first 2 touchdowns because Washington got it down the field. Texas kept him out of the end zone, but that's where Washington's running game comes in. It keeps teams somewhat honest against Washington and against Washington, and that's what Washington is going to need to do. They're going to have to make sure that they realize that Penix is not going to be throwing the ball so many times during the game. He was 29 of 38, but Dylan Johnson had 21 carries during the game for only 49 yards. It's an effective 21 carries for 49 yards. I know Blake Corum had 21 carries as well for 84. But at least, again, this is about keeping teams honest. And if Johnson has a setback, it's a big problem for Washington. It's actually a much bigger problem than you would think. They have Tybo Rogers, five runs for 19 yards. And then everybody else is pretty much not played at all or just barely played. Will Nixon's a sophomore, played very briefly. There's there's an Arizona State transfer on the team by the name of Daniel Magada, largely a kick returner. Senior Richard Newton has only rushed the ball 5 times this season. Sam Adams II was in street clothes. So Johnson has had injuries to his foot since he injured it initially against Oregon State in mid-November, but has still been able to go on. If he cannot do anything on Monday, that is going to sorely hamper the possibility of Washington to pull off what would be a minor upset in the national championship game.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Washington, Rabbi, is the fact that, it kind of goes against their identity to actually run the football. They run it a little bit less than 28 times per game, and that's one of the lowest rates in all of college football. There have been a couple of times this year where the knock on them is that they haven't stuck with the run when they should in certain game situations. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting, whether Dylan can go or not, how they do or do not incorporate the run game, A, to keep Michigan a little off balance, and B, if the situation dictates it, can they stay with it long enough to do what they need it to do?
Yeah, that's going to be one of the more interesting plot lines of this game, but who knows? I think we were talking about that hero ball earlier this year. Penix does a little bit of hero ball, and it's kind of almost cost him from time to time, and just hasn't yet. Monday could possibly the day that it could blow up quickly if that running game isn't intact. All right. So, did I stupidly put my picks for the college football semifinals in the group chat? Yes, I did. Did I get the winners wrong in those games? Yes, I did. Am I a glutton for punishment? Yes, I am. So you know the deal starting with Anthony. I want a winner. I want a score. I want an MVP on this Monday's matchup in the college football playoff final in Houston, Texas.
You know what? I talked about strength on strength, and I'm gonna go Michigan 34, Washington 24. I think this is the game where J.J. McCarthy solidifies his status as an all-time Michigan great quarterback up there with Harbaugh and a certain guy named Brady. I don't know. I wonder what happened to that guy anyway. But yeah, I'm
Brady
going
never won
Michigan
a
30.
title. What are we talking about here? He won one Sugar Bowl against Alabama, for God's sakes. Orange
Yeah.
Bowl against Alabama. I'm sorry, Orange Bowl.
Well, yeah. You know
You
what I
know it.
mean. You know what I mean. Tom Brady. You get the joke.
No,
Oh,
Tom Petty is really a
you know
Michigan
what?
legend when you think about it.
Okay, I take back my apology for the spoiler earlier. Anyway, Michigan 34-24, J.J. McCarthy MVP of the game.
Okay.
It's kind of fitting, that the final 4-team CFP title game will be a matchup between the champs of the Big Ten and the Pac-12, making it a de facto Rose Bowl. So before I get into my prediction, because I would have made this our closer if events had been different, I'm going to go on record here and agree wholeheartedly with Kirk Herbstreit that going forward, college football's national championship game should be the Rose Bowl. Other than baseball, no other sport is as tied to its history than college football. So let the rest of the playoffs be about corporate signage and NFL stadiums. But for the game that decides the trophy, be true to what the sport is. And very few things are as tied to what the sport is than the granddaddy of them all. Full stop. Y'all can come at me later. This is a tougher call than most of you may expect. As much as I am a diehard Hail to the Victors, Go Blue Michigan fan, the old quarterback in me really enjoys watching Washington's offense with Michael Penix Jr. at the controls. But at the end of the day, I think that with everything that the Wolverines have been through, I just think they want it more. And that's zero disrespect to what Kalen DeBoer has done in Seattle. This is the team that Jim Harbaugh has wanted since he came back to Ann Arbor. They may not have the most talent in terms of former 4- or 5-star recruits, but this is an experienced team that feels like it has been disrespected all season. Granted, some of it is courtesy of them shooting themselves in the foot, but they've persevered through all the various challenges they've faced both on and off the field. Blake Corum, who is the heart and soul of this team, came back for one reason: this game. I just can't see him letting the Wolverines lose. Michigan 27-24. I agree with Anthony. J.J. McCarthy is MVP, but Corum has the game-winning touchdown.
I'm going to go against you both, and here is why. First of all, I want to guarantee apparently a Michigan victory for the both players, so that's exactly why. And second, in watching the national semifinals, I thought Michigan was on the ropes a lot more than Washington was. Washington did only win by 6, but they never trailed during that game. And really, the only reason, again, why it was so close at the end is because of the unfortunate injury to Johnson, which stopped the clock. I think Washington is a team that reminds me a tiny little bit of the, sorry, Jay, Ohio State team from 2002 that just won everything close, and is really, really ready for this moment and always plays a close game. Michigan had their close game. Finally, we were waiting for it all season. Now, Ohio State game was close too, but this was literally a oh shit type of game before Michigan. But I think if they haven't played someone like Michael Penix, and I don't think that they've had anything to really mirror what Washington is going to bring to them on Monday night. This were a game that you had more time to prepare for, I would go Michigan here. But considering the circumstances and just considering the emotion going into this game, wouldn't it be funny that the conference that is about to fold had the last national championship of the 14 playoff? Washington 34, Michigan 31. Michael Penix Jr. would be the MVP, obviously. So I'm going to go there. So that's how I see this game. So put your money on Michigan immediately. I would say though, take the plus 3.5 in this game. I'm actually surprised it's that low, but I do think this game is a field goal game either way. At least I hope so. Hopefully it's not last year. Semifinals that were freaking entertaining on Monday, and I enjoyed every second of them as somebody who doesn't really have any skin in the game. I would say Jay did too, but that's a lie. All right. What's your favorite finale? I'm a big fan of that Who Shot J.R. Dallas finale, but not the Game of Thrones finale. Never, ever, ever. So now we give you the NFL season finale as the NFL just tries to go into cliffhanger mode. A lot of interesting matchups last week of the season. You have 4 division titles still up for grabs. There are still 11 teams that can grab 5 playoff spots. I did the math, Steve Kornacki. I consulted with him, we're all good. All right, Anthony, what matchup are you looking for in the NFL's Week 18?
I don't know about you guys, but I'm more of a Who Shot Mr. Burns kind of guy when it comes to finales.
That's true. That's true.
But that's another story.
I wanted to get to all demographics up here, which is why I went Dallas and Game of Thrones. I could have thrown in MASH in there and really gone even worse, but I decided to at least keep it towards some time when I could have been alive. I know I wasn't live in '82. Really was.
What a game I'm looking at is Saturday night. The Texans going to Indianapolis to play the Colts. Now here's the thing: the winner of this game is guaranteed going into the playoffs next weekend. The caveat is a win at Jacksonville stumbling 24 hours later on Sunday afternoon actually gives the winner of this game a division title and a home playoff game. So there's plenty of stake for both in this game for more than just the winning your in scenario. This is a matchup from week 2. Like this is like all the way back week 2. Anthony Richardson started that game for Indianapolis. Got knocked out of the game with a concussion. Gardner Minshew, who was the starting quarterback this week for the Colts, came in to win the game, and we saw the beginning brilliance of C.J. Stroud in that game, throwing for over 300 yards in a loss. It's going to be, and this is rather quickly, it's going to be a strength against weakness scenario. For the Texans, getting C.J. Stroud back the timing couldn't have been more impeccable. They got him back last week. Didn't do a whole lot, completed 75% of his passes, 213 yards, a touchdown, 102.7 passing rating in a win. He didn't do a whole lot, but he did enough. And obviously, the Texans was just so dominant that they didn't really do a whole lot. In this game, however, he may have to do a whole lot, and he may be wanting to do a whole lot. The Colts secondary is young, beat up, inexperienced, and C.J. Stroud is gotta be licking his chops to go to get down to push the ball downfield. The one thing the Colts do, however, is pressure the quarterback. They have 49 sacks on the season. Excuse me. So that's going to be very interesting. If you're the Indianapolis Colts, Gardner Minshew is a guy who has done a good job of protecting the football. He did that last week in a win over the Raiders. The Colts are 4-0 when they don't have a turnover. When they lose a turnover battle with Minshew, a quarterback at 3-5. So obviously taking care of the football is going to be key. And Jonathan Taylor, they were able to get him reestablished last week. He's only played 9 games this season. He hasn't played a whole lot. He only got 500 yards for the year. He's been banged up, been injury prone. 21 carries, 96 yards last week in the win. For the Colts, they have to be able to establish the run game and be able to allow Gardner Minshew to work out the play action and taking shots downfield. That has been the Colts' recipe for success, and be able, and also defensively get after the quarterback and keep the game close. So I think this is gonna be a close game that's gonna come down to the fourth quarter and just who doesn't make the mistake. CJ Stroud, he's played extremely well, and we talked about it in our year show. If he doesn't get injured, he's probably our baby new year because he was also a remarkable rookie season until the injury. Came back last week. This week, maybe he'll be back to the CJ Stroud of old. Last week was more of getting himself in the playing shape. But this should be a fun game. Saturday night is national television. The Monday Night Football crew is calling this game, and every day is on the line. I mean, you win, you're in, you lose, the season's over, and if you win, you get to sleep on it, and maybe Monday morning be a division winner and get to stay home for a playoff game. So there was a lot to look forward to in this game. This is Lucas Oil Stadium is going to be really rocking. It's going to be the first nationally televised game for both teams, I believe. At least the first quote unquote Monday night game, since it's a Saturday night special anyway. But it'll be the first time both teams have been featured in a primetime window.
What's going to be very interesting. What's interesting to me is just the improvement of both of these teams going in from last year. Like these are the teams that occupied the second through fourth picks of the draft. As you can remember, Houston had the second and third pick, and I'm very interested just to see what both quarterbacks do in a very, very high pressured situation. Remember, last year we had Tennessee and Jacksonville basically playing for the AFC South in the playoff spot. Both quarterbacks, if you remember, Josh Dobbs was one of the quarterbacks in that game.
By the
both
way,
quarterbacks
also,
were kind of
by the way,
struggling.
that was also a Saturday night game done by the Monday Night Crew.
Yep, and that same
on
exact
national
time slot.
television. Yep.
So going to be very interesting to see. Jay, Week 18 is obviously all for divisional matchups, and the history between the Bills and the Dolphins has another chapter. I'm excited for this one on Sunday night.
Yeah, neither of these teams played their best game last week. The only difference is that the Bills pulled out a 27-21 win against the Patriots on a day where Josh Allen had a better quote game than passing game, while the Dolphins once again laid an egg against the AFC's contenders. They're 1-4, as the Ravens ran them out of the building to the tune of 56-19. They'll close out the regular season on Sunday Night Football with the AFC East and potentially the Bills' playoff hopes on the line, though the Bills will know their fate before kickoff. The Dolphins had previously clinched a playoff spot, but a win here and they secured the AFC's number 2 seed. Miami is hoping that running back Devon Achane, who rushed for 107 yards on 7.6 yards per carry against the Ravens, will play on
By
Sunday.
the way, that's Achan, by the way.
Dan,
so,
my bad. Appreciate the correction. He was limited in practice, but Miami is hoping he'll play on Sunday. However, neither his backfield mate, running back Raheem Mostert, nor wide receiver Jalen Waddle are expected to play. Neither practice this week, as Mostert is dealing with a knee injury and Waddle is dealing with a high ankle sprain. And to make matters worse, the Dolphins will be without their best pass rusher, Bradley Chubb, who leads them with 11 sacks for the rest of the season and the playoffs after he tore his ACL, and that's after previously losing his pass rush partner, Jalen Phillips. It's a huge blow as the Dolphins relied on their pass rush, number 3 in the NFL with 53 sacks, to offset a secondary that is just number 11 against the pass. Not what you want when facing Josh Allen on Sunday. When these two teams met earlier this season, a 48-20 beatdown by the Bulls, Miami was able to hold Allen to a 37.5% success rate on pass plays when they were able to get pressure on him, but when they couldn't, that success rate was 81%. And those next-gen stats are a little misleading when you take into consideration the fact that Allen completed 84% of his 25 passes for 320 yards with 4 touchdowns and a perfect 158.3 passer rating. He was actually pressured on only 8 of those 25 attempts. He was hit just once and sacked only twice. But Miami seems to have an issue with physical teams that can punish them on both sides of the ball. The Bills definitely qualify in that regard, and their offense, like Baltimore's, is led by a dual-threat quarterback running a scheme predicated on having run-pass balance and being physical. They lead the NFL in explosive play rate over the last 3 weeks. Miami's defense gave up 491 total yards and 8 touchdowns in their high-powered offense, which leads the NFL in total offensive points per game, only managed 375 total yards and 19 points. The Ravens defense held Tua Tagovailoa to a 57.9 completion percentage and a 71.9 passer rating for the game. Both are his worst of the season. They also picked him off twice and sacked him 3 times. That game film should have the Bills defense licking its chops coming off a performance where they allowed only 14 points, held the Patriots to just 294 total yards, forced 4 turnovers, 1 fumble and 3 interceptions, one of which was a pick 6, and held Pats quarterback Bailey Zappi to a 47.3 passer rating. This is the same defense that piled up 4 sacks, 1 pick, and held Tyreek Hill to a season-low 58 yards and kept him out of the end zone in that 48-20 Buffalo win. Think about this. The Bills were out of the playoff picture when they fell to 6-6 after their Thanksgiving weekend loss to the Eagles. Since then, they've won 4 straight to jump all the way up to the 6th seed, and they now have a shot to steal the AFC East from the Dolphins Sunday night. Win, and they're the AFC's number 2 seed. Lose, and they could be out of the playoffs entirely. What do we need to see from them against Miami? Ironically enough, it's a better offensive showing than what they did against New England. The Bills have been somewhat riding a resurgent defense on this winning streak, which I'm sure has head coach Sean McDermott, who's also the defensive play caller, as happy as can be, though he'll want to keep that resurgence going and pair it with the kind of offense we're used to seeing from Allen and company. Allen was mediocre at best against New England, 15 of 30. That's only 50% completion. 169 yards, 5.6 yards per pass, 0 scores, 1 pick, a 53.3 passer rating. Though it was very much a tale of two halves for the Bills signal caller. He was just 7 of 20, 35% completion for just 46 yards and an ugly interception thrown into double coverage, and the offense managed just 13 points. Granted, his O-line didn't give him much time to work through his reads, and his receivers had some drops, but plenty of the blame fell on Allen. The Bills changed tactics in the second half, running the ball on 67% of their plays, excluding kneel downs, and only throwing 10 passes. Allen, who was a factor in the run game with 11 carries for 44 yards and 2 scores, completed 8 of those 10 passes for 123 yards, which got his numbers to that mediocre level. Not the type of showing you want to have going into such a critical game, so with so much on the line. Granted, Allen has had these late season toe stubbers before and rebounded nicely, and this game is in Orchard Park. The offense, the run game specifically, could use a return to form by running back James Cook, who was held to 48 yards on 16 carries at 3 yards a pop, and by the Patriots, and has been somewhat of a feast. He had 4 games of 98 yards or better, averaging 127 yards per game in them with 7.4 yards per carry, or famine, less than 75 yards in the other 12 games, averaging 44 yards per game with a 3.8 yards per carry. Then there's the mystery that's Stephon Diggs. Through the first 6 games, he was on pace for 139 receptions, 1,757 yards, and 14 TDs. That's Tyreek Hill numbers, guys. In the 10 games he played after that, that pace dropped down to 87 catches for just 809 yards and 5 scores. He's inexplicably, at least to this outsider, played less than 60% of Buffalo's offensive snaps the past 3 weeks. He's had less than 50 yards receiving in 6 of his last 7 games. He was held to just 26 against the Pats. Maybe playing the Dolphins will be just what he needs to return him to his early season form. In 8 games against the Dolphins, Diggs has 46 catches for 632 yards and 7 touchdowns. The Bills are 7-1 in those games, and he had 6 catches for 120 yards and 3 touchdowns in the Week 4 blowout. Check out the Bills' potential playoff scenarios, barring any ties. Scenario number 1, Bills beat the Dolphins. They're the 2 seed in the AFC and will host the number 7 seed in the wildcard round. Scenario number 2, Bills lose to the Dolphins. Both the Jaguars and the Steelers lose. Bills are the AFC number 6 seed, and they travel to Kansas City for the wildcard round. Scenario number 3, Bills lose to the Dolphins. One of the Jaguars or Steelers lose. Bills are the AFC number 7 seed and will face the Dolphins yet again, this time in Miami for the wildcard round. Scenario number 4, Bills lose to the Dolphins. Both the Steelers and Jaguars win. Bills miss the playoffs entirely. NFL couldn't ask for a much better game to close out the regular season than a division rivalry with such high playoff stakes. This should be fun.
FYI, the game is in Miami. It's not in Orchard Park. So
wait, it's in
Miami.
The game in Week 4 was not in Miami. I thought it was.
The game in Week 4 was in Orchard Park. This game is in Miami. So
I was looking back at the highlights and I saw sun shining, and I thought the game must have been in Miami.
You think Buffalo is snowing in September October all of a sudden? You think that they just go into darkness the whole entire time?
Hey, it's Buffalo, man.
Okay, so the game I'm picking is there's only one team with something to play for. It's a win-in situation for the Green Bay Packers against the Chicago Bears. It's the oldest rivalry in the NFL, and the Packers have owned this rivalry to the tune of 9 straight wins over the Bears. But obviously, this is a completely different situation. But when you think about it, it's the completely same situation for the Packers. They played a division rival last year in the Lions at home. Lions had nothing to play for. They didn't have anything to play for going into that game, and they ruined the Packers' season. Bears could easily do the same exact thing again. This is going to be very interesting. The Packers, by the way, are one of only 4 teams in the NFL without a Pro Bowler. The other teams out there are Washington and Carolina and New England. Which one of these things is not like the others here, kids? Jordan Love has had pretty good. In the first meeting against the Packers, he threw for 3 touchdowns. And in his past 7 games, he's had 16 touchdown passes and only 1 interception. He's going to be a 4,000-yard thrower this year, and he has 30 touchdowns and ranks him third in the league, and he'll probably pass Brock Purdy, who's not going to be playing this week, so he'll be second in the league come the end of this week. Now, Green Bay has been up and down all year, but in the first year post Aaron Rodgers, wouldn't it be funny if the Green Bay Packers did what they couldn't do last year with Aaron Rodgers and make it back into the postseason? A lot of good stuff on this team that you can see. Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, 8 touchdowns together each. Reed has 10 touchdowns because he's also had some touchdowns off the scrimmage. Aaron Jones is back. He's had 120 plus yards in his last 2 games. And Green Bay, they don't have any stars, but they have a possibility of making it back into the playoffs. I don't know what it says about the NFC, but it's really interesting to just see that the Green Bay Packers are back in this position. What's really interesting to me is how the Chicago Bears have kind of bounced back for multiple reasons. They've won 5 out of their last 7, and the only 2 games that they lost was a game against Detroit, where Detroit had to score the final minute and come back from 21 down, and a game against Cleveland in mid-December, where they were literally just 2 hands away on a bounce down. And in this case, they would be 9-6, and they would probably be in the playoffs already, and this game wouldn't matter. Now, the Chicago Bears have been amazing in the last 2 months, ever since Justin Fields came back from that injury, which corresponds to the 5-7 run starting in a week game against Carolina on November the 9th. Montez Sweat, 12.5 sacks this year, 6 with the Bears. He's going to the Pro Bowl. Nice job, Washington, doing that. DJ Moore, career season, 1,300 plus yards, and a very huge part of what Chicago is going to do in the future. Now, what is that future, you ask? And that's what even more interesting to me. Justin Fields got we want Fields chance last week after Chicago beat Atlanta. He's still in the bottom of the league in passer efficiency, bottom third of the league. Passer efficiency and passer rating. But considering the bad start he had to the year and the injuries, he started for 2,414 yards, 16 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 630 rushing yards, and 4 touchdowns on the ground. And if they can get themselves another win here, they're going to be 8-9, the same record as the Packers were. And a lot of people thought the Bears were the worst team in the league starting the season. Going to be a very interesting situation. As you know, the Carolina Panthers, who clinched the worst record of the league last week, and with an owner that decides to just throw water at somebody when he doesn't like what they're saying, Chicago has their pick. So that's going to be a very interesting part of this offseason. Justin Fields has proven, without a shadow of a doubt, he is a starting quarterback in the NFL. This is a not a lifetime, but once a good opportunity here for the Bears, because you don't finish 8-9 and get the number 1 pick too often, and that's what the Chicago Bears have done. And considering the season that people thought they were going to have, the fact that they're going to possibly keep a coach next season who has done a very good job these last 2 months and possibly have a pretty damn good team intact. I think they're right up there in what has been a very competitive NFC North. Surprisingly, I think I'm rooting for the Bears to kind of do what the Lions did last year and ruin their season and get themselves up on a good note. This is going to be a very, very fun 425 game on Sunday. All right. Finally, last thing we're going to talk about. We talked about this ad nauseum between us on our year-end show. So despite the fact that we're in the national title game now, and neither Florida State or Alabama are here, let's talk about it. Florida State didn't make it to the CFP Final Four despite an undefeated record, 13-0 in a Power 5 conference of the ACC, the first of their kind not to do so. Alabama did 12-1 in the SEC. We talked about this ad nauseum. So, Anthony, I'll give you the last word to start. Who deserved this spot more? And before you say that, I would not take these bowls into consideration, considering all of the stuff that happened. What is your opinion going into all of this? If it's changed, that's fine, but I'm putting the disclaimer on there. The bowls, to me, have nothing to do with this initial decision and what this decision means going forward.
No, and the irony that you said that because a lot of people are holding the bowl game that happened to Florida State against them as far as the argument as to why they were left out of the college football playoff. Like, keep in mind, there's a caveat to that 63 to beat down that Georgia gave them. Georgia basically played half a team back and a team of backups. 14 players sat out in that game. I mean, that's certainly not the Florida State team that was left out. And we talked about this obviously the last couple of shows, a year or show as well. As a fan, I would feel more comfortable if we saw Florida State get left out because of something that was football related, like a strength of schedule tiebreaker or head-to-head matchup, or the fact, or even them losing a game along the way. Something to that regard, I think would have made the decision to pick Alabama over them a little more, to me, a little more reassuring. I don't know if that's a great way of saying it, but Florida State was basically punished because it just didn't have their best player, and it felt like the committee sent the wrong message, basically telling a team that did everything they had to do. They won with their best player. They won with Jordan Travis. They won without Jordan Travis. They won the 2 games they needed to win. Was it pretty? No, but I don't recall anybody win a national championship based on style points. And they held a really good Louisville team to 6 points to win the ACC championship game. They were undefeated Power 5 conference champion. They did everything right. And you basically had 13 geeks in a boardroom tell them your absolute best for a whole season was not good enough compared to an Alabama team that was barely a top-ranked team for much of the season. They just happened to be remind us they were Alabama for one weekend when they were the only team in the country that
Wait a minute. Hold on a second.
Whoa. Let me finish.
I want you to finish
my point.
I want you to finish this.
The only team, realistically, that matched up well with Georgia on both sides of the football, and they needed a fourth and forever prayer to even get to the SEC championship game. I felt like, look, it said it was the wrong message. It basically solidified that the college football community, we've seen this, the college football playoff since such a 2014, they have changed the criteria based on the team that was probably the easier pick or the more popular team to pick. We saw this in 2016 when Ohio State got in, and they didn't even play for the old conference championship. We saw where Alabama 1 year get in. And yeah, look, look, Alabama is a brand. They are money. We saw the TV ratings for the Rose Bowl. So if you talk about dollars and cents and TV ratings, they absolutely made the right decision. If you are a player in the Florida State locker room that busted your ass all season long, and you did everything you had to do to play for a national championship, and get told, you know what, you don't have the best player, then you're not the same team. That would be like Roger Goodell walking into the 2018 Philadelphia Eagles locker room and telling them, you know what, you're 10-1, you don't deserve to make the playoffs because Carson Wentz is not playing for the rest of the season. You know, that would literally get a gift slap heard around the world if the NFL ever held a 10-1 team that lost a strong quarterback to that regard. That's why I say I feel like the players were cheated because the decision was taken out of their hands and it was not a competition football related decision. And as a player, that's something you're not gonna sit through. You're not gonna want to live with. And who knows if they're the number 4 seed, we saw Michigan struggle against Alabama. It wasn't like they were that Michigan ran away with that game, and Alabama's obviously defensively is a great team, but you saw how good Florida State defense was. They were top 5 in the nation for a reason, and they even stepped it up after their best player got hurt. So I would have look, even if the game did not turn out well, they earned an opportunity to at least play, at least let the game decide it on the field. But that's what we all want. Now suddenly, because Alabama just seems to be the sexier pick. No coincidence that ESPN is broadcasting the SEC next season. No coincidence whatsoever that all of a sudden they get in because they were great for one weekend over a team that had played phenomenal for all season long and even played just as well when they didn't have their best player. I just thought that I still stand by it. Look, we had 2 great semifinal games, but I still say that the committee got it wrong as far as sending a message of next season. Well, next season obviously not going to worry about that, but we playing our butts off and we still get the short end of the stick, and we did everything to fit the criteria. It's the Isaiah Thomas motto. I did everything to fit the criteria, but I still wasn't selected. And that's Florida State in a nutshell. And that's, as a player, I can understand being frustrated and not really want to play in the Orange Bowl when you feel like you should be playing the Rose Bowl. I mean, that is something that a 19, 20, 21-year-old young man is going to really have a hard time digesting, that 13 individuals in a boardroom decided your season and not you on a football field.
This is a reason why we're going to 8 teams, by the way. So I understand that. I'm sorry, we're going to 12 teams, by the way. Should be 8 teams. But yes, I agree that Florida State got robbed. But your reasoning, Anthony, is just it doesn't make any sense, because you can say SEC bias, SEC bias. The truth of the matter is this: if this wasn't an SEC team getting it over an ACC team, no one would be crying. Everybody would be saying, hallelujah, you made the right decision. This is great. And the one thing that I've noticed I'm just going to just say a couple of these points. Number one, yes, Ohio State didn't win their conference in 2016. They lost a game late in the season and ended up being in this same exact spot, and they turned out pretty well. That Alabama team that you mentioned, they won the national title, and they still had a pretty good resume because there weren't enough good teams out there. The problem with this year is there weren't enough good teams out there. You could make a very good case that Georgia, in almost any other year, would still be in the college football playoff even after losing the SEC title game. And honestly, they probably would do as well as Alabama or even better. They could easily have been in the national title game, but that's how it works out. This was a no-win decision for the committee. I never want to defend Alabama, but you have given me no choice, Anthony. Alabama was a struggle at the beginning of the season. However, they beat Ole Miss, ranked team. They beat Tennessee, ranked team. They beat LSU, ranked team. And then they had the best win of anybody this entire season. And yes, you could claim, they only beat Texas A&M by 6. They only beat Arkansas by 3. But this Florida State team, they only beat Boston College by 2 with a full lineup. They only beat Clemson in overtime by 7, and Jordan Travis was still there. They beat Miami by 7. Jordan Travis, still there. So unfortunately, this is the way the cookie crumbles when it comes to this situation. There's no right answer to this situation. It's a 2-part question when you think about it. Question number 1, is your team one of the 4 best teams in the country? The answer to that might be no. That's the question that would be most likely no in this whole entire Florida State scenario. We can talk about moving the criteria as much as we want, but the honest to God truth is, yes, the criteria does change year after year. That's what happens when you have a committee deciding the 4 teams. Want to go back to computers and give us the top 12 teams in the BCS? That criteria will never change. And I would not want to see 12 computers deciding my own fate. I don't know if I like 12 geeks deciding my own fate, but I like 12 computers. I like 12 human people deciding my fate more than 12 people who aren't actually existing. They're AI, they're on a computer. Truth of the matter is, again, this is a simple two-part conversation. Did Florida State deserve to be in the college football playoff with their accomplishments? They absolutely did, I think, personally. But the next question is, were they one of the 4 best teams in the country going in? And that's where you could have it down. Honest to God, yes, you can play it on the field as much as you want. But this is what happens with a committee. When Kenyon Martin got hurt in 2000 for Cincinnati going into the NCAA tournament, did they get a 1 seed even though they were definitely one of the 4 best teams in the country the whole entire year? No, they got a 2 seed and ended up losing in the second round. It's not about what you deserve. It's about the team that you put on the field right now. It sucks what happened. By the way, that Louisville team that you mentioned lost to USC pretty badly with Caleb Williams backup going on the field that day afterwards. Bring the Louisville game in all you want. But the truth of the matter is this. This was a tough situation regardless. There were 8 teams that could have easily been in this 14 playoff. I would put Oregon against anybody. I would put Ohio State against anybody. And again, I would put Georgia against anybody, regardless of the 56-3 win. They could have easily been there. This was just not the year. This was just not the right situation for Florida State. Does it suck? Yes, it sucks. I understand as players feel like they should have wanted a national championship pick. And that's the other problem with the whole bowl system to begin with. They make the Orange Bowl and all the other bowls pretty much meaningless. So, Florida State got... Let me finish. Hey. I let you finish. Let me finish. Florida State definitely got screwed over in some way, shape, or form. However, it's not a travesty. It was a tough decision. There was no right answer to this situation. And honestly, after the college football playoff has been basically ducking those bullets for about 7 years, Matrix-like, because of all the stuff that's happened to them, unfortunately, this is the hand that we're dealt with. This was the situation that they had. End of story.
I would say this too, though. 7-5. Keep that in mind. 7-5. That's the ACC's record against the SEC. So we want to keep talking on about the SEC being this dominant franchise when the stepbrother conference just kicked your ass in 12 games this season. I mean, come on.
7-5 is kicking your ass. And remember, that's the whole entire SEC against the whole entire ACC. You don't judge a book by its one cover. Remember.
Yeah, but I can judge it.
Remember, the CFP had 4 teams.
I can't judge a book by a cover, but I can judge a book by where it's on the Amazon top selling list. And the last time I checked, 7-5 is a lot better than 5-7. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
Again, it's 2 games, and it's honestly, again, this is more of a Vanderbilt against Boston College thing than everyone else. I can look up those situations, and I can tell you what the situations were. So it's not a situation where it's all of a sudden one conference is better than the other. Again, deserving? Yes. Travesty? No. Jay, I can't believe I'm saying this, but you need to talk in this situation.
You guys are very entertaining. Look, I mean, Anthony's rant and Rabbi, your response covered pretty much everything. So I'm going to get into something else, but first I'm going to reiterate what I said on the year-end show for those who haven't watched it. It's 3 hours long. I get it. For some of you, it's TLDR or W in this case. So in a nutshell, for me, this entire situation was a Kobayashi Maru and no one on the committee was James Kirk. For those who don't speak Star Trek, that means the committee was in a no-win scenario and there was no way to change the conditions of the situation to have everyone survive. No matter what choice the committee made, FSU or Alabama, they were going to get crucified. The only question was whether it would be in Tuscaloosa or Tallahassee. Turns out it was Tallahassee. The committee may have seen it as the correct decision, but it'll be debated ad nauseum, as these 2 gentlemen just did, as to whether it was the right decision. Look, based on how FSU looked in their 63-3 Orange Bowl loss at the hands of a Georgia Bulldogs team that seemed to actually want to play and win, as compared to the game that Bama gave Michigan, the optics say that the committee's decision worked out for the best in terms of giving college football fans a great game in a national semifinal. which, even though that's not supposed to be part of the decision-making process, is something we all as fans hope to get when the teams and matchups are announced. Look, I don't know if FSU just wasn't up for the game or having 9 players opt out for various reasons, including star wide receiver Keon Coleman and star defensive lineman Jared Verse, and losing a dozen to the transfer portal, including QB2 Tate Rodemaker, who would have started the game, whether all that left them too short on talent against UGA, but this was also a reflection of Georgia's culture as compared to that of FSU's. The Dogs had no non-injury opt-outs and took this game seriously. That's why they're 3-0 in their non-playoff bowl game since losing to Texas in the 2018 Sugar Bowl. FSU complained long and loud after being excluded from the CFP Final Four, but they did nothing in the Orange Bowl to show the committee or the rest of us that they made the wrong choice going with Bama, and the fact that FSU is also suing the ACC just makes the optics for them even worse. All that being said, I'm going to turn to the other thing that, kind of sparked my interest this past week. The nonsense that prevented the 12-team playoff from happening this year is the reason why we're in this situation, and one has to wonder if FSU would have had closer to a full roster if they had been playing for a first-round playoff game in next year's alignment, and if that would have made a difference in their performance. One also has to wonder if college football has gotten too much out of control with all the teams changing conferences, the Pac-12 all but deceased, not to mention the madness with the transfer portal and NIL, which is why when I heard UCLA coach Chip Kelly's press conference in advance of his team's LA Bowl matchup with Boise State, I thought, here's a solution that really needs to be looked at. Kelly called for a complete overhaul of college football structure in the wake of the demise of the Pac-12. His solution calls for college football to become independent from other sports, something he's advocated for in the past. With conferences like the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, and ACC continuing to add teams from what seems like everywhere, Kelly's version of that independence would lead to a consolidation of both Power 5 and Big 5 schools under a single commissioner. And here's his quote on it. I think we should all be independent in football. You can have a 64-team conference that's in the Power 5. You can have a 64-team conference in the Group of 5, and we separate it and we play each other. You can have the West Coast teams, and then every year we play 7 games against the West Coast teams, and then we play the East. So we play Syracuse, Boston College, Pitt, West Virginia, Virginia. Then the next year you play against the South while you still play your 7 teams. You can play a 7-game schedule. You can play 4 against another division opponent. Yeah, and you can always play 1 against a mountain team every year so that we can still keep those rivalries going, end quote. Kelly is essentially proposing the Notre Dame model, where the Irish are independent in football and in a conference for other sports. Keep the conferences as they are for all other sports and separate football, but keep the revenue sharing for the schools. To Kelly, such an arrangement would allow non-revenue sports, as well as basketball, to continue scheduling regionally independent of football's money-driven machinations. Here's the quote. Our sports different than everybody else. We only play once a week. Travel's not a big deal for football, but it is a big deal for other sports. So that's my theory, end quote. Not that he's thought about this a lot or talked about it previously, as he said, very tongue-in-cheek at his presser. Yes, it might change the TV deals, but the money would still be there for everyone who wants to chase those football dollars and give the broadcast partners the college football inventory they crave, but not screw over all the other sports at those schools. As Kelly mentioned, this would allow UCLA to keep playing Arizona State in softball and Arizona in basketball, which is how Kelly believes things should be. I totally endorse this idea. Charlie Baker, are you listening?
Yeah. I completely agree. I do think I'm glad that Chip Kelly mentioned the basketball aspect of all of this, because it just sounded to me like it was like football is this important. Let's break it off from everything. But the truth of the matter is, still a lot of logistics that would need to go into that. I'm glad Kelly brought it up. I think it's probably not feasible, just considering all the movement that's happened, and also the fact that eventually everything has to come back together. I think I just want to see a world where football doesn't act like the minor leagues of the college football doesn't act like the minor leagues of the NFL, which it sometimes does. But the transfer portal is what also definitely makes it interesting. But that's the one other thing I get from it too. It's a way to keep college football kind of separate from everything else, which it already is. But the truth of the matter is, with the amount of money it makes, that's a completely different story. And that's something that also needs to be brought up just to go back into the previous discussion. You didn't see an ACC commit, and this is, by the way, a negative towards Alabama. You didn't see the ACC commissioner basically groveling to get Florida State in the playoff. You saw the SEC commissioner, Greg Sankey, basically say playoff with the SEC doesn't make any sense, which kind of a little brash, but
Arrogant much?
Politicking though.
Yeah.
And I know you were talking about it before, that you said that it'll stop a little bit next year. I don't think it ever stops, honestly. I think it'll be in a different vein.
Yeah.
But I think the people that just doesn't shut up don't shut up. And that's kind of something that's very interesting. But there's a lot more discussion of this that could go on in another time. Check that in our news show called We Love the SEC, coming this fall.
Wait, doesn't Paul Feinbaum already do that show on ESPN?
A lot of people do that, but that's a whole other story for a whole other time. All right, we're done. For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, I'm Steve Rabinowitz. Guys, you can watch us live, although we won't live this because it was a recording on tape.
Normally, you can watch us live.
Normally, you can watch us live and let a bunch of naysayers know at facebook.com/onthesportslines, or let the naysayers know on demand at youtube.com/onthesportslines. And Jay?
Our Twitter handle is at ONTH Sportslines, where tomorrow you will find a link to this show, along with other interesting tidbits in the world of sports that we find interesting and think are worth your time to read, view, or otherwise check out.
And if you don't like any of those links, let a naysayer know, and we'll be there immediately.
And nothing will change.
Nothing will change.
No.
We'll be gonna hold off on saying naysayers anymore. We'll be back next week, naysayers. Good night, and enjoy the CFP title game from the sports lines. I know someone will be on Noodle. I'm fatherhood this weekend. Good night.
Good night, everybody.